At my son's funeral, the flowers hadn't even begun to wilt when she walked in. The woman who abandoned him 15 years earlier. And she came not with tears, but with a claim. She said she was there to collect the $24 million my son had left behind, as if it were hers by right. My chest tightened, and the whispers around the pews sliced deeper than the sight of his coffin lowering into the ground. I stood there, torn between heartbreak and a fury that pressed hard against my ribs. This wasn't just an insult to me, it was an insult to his memory. Veronica Pike, that was her name, the one who vanished without so much as a goodbye, who never sent a single dollar of support, who missed every hospital visit when he was fighting for his life. She arrived in 4-inch heels, a black dress cut sharp enough to wound, and a smirk that froze the entire chapel. Her words rang out clear, rehearsed, like she had practiced them in front of a mirror. I'm here to claim what belongs to me. As his wife, I have every legal right. The air left the room. Gasps rippled. Heads turned. Murmurs rose. I didn't react. Not yet. I kept my eyes fixed on the brass plate of his coffin, my hand pressed flat against my dress to stop the tremor. My late husband always said I had the patience of a stone wall. That day, I needed every bit of it. Beside her, a young lawyer shuffled nervously through papers in a blue folder, stumbling over phrases about marital status and survivors' rights. He hadn't read deeply enough to know the truth. She had signed away all of that a long time ago. To my left, Ruth Sear, my attorney, and the only one in that room who knew what was about to unfold, slid a folder from her bag. She gave me a tiny nod. Not yet. Her eyes said, wait. The whispers thickened like smoke. Her arrival hadn't just shattered the silence. It had cracked whatever illusion of peace was left. I turned slowly to face her. She didn't look away. Her chin lifted, eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone certain she had already won. Maybe she expected tears. Maybe she expected me to beg, but I stood steady. And perhaps that unsettled her, because her voice rose louder. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to collect what's legally mine. Finally, I spoke. My voice was calm, colder than hers. You are not his wife. Not anymore. For the first time, she faltered. Her lawyer whispered, flipping through pages, but I could see it in her face. She had hoped I wouldn't know the law. She thought I would be too broken to resist. She believed this funeral would be her stage. Ruth stepped forward then, quiet as a shadow, and handed the pastor a certified copy of the divorce decree, stamped, sealed, notarized, a full waiver of any future claim, finalized more than a decade ago. The hush that followed was heavier than a shout. Someone coughed. Someone muttered, "Lord help us." But no one spoke for her, not a single soul. She stood frozen, lips pressed tight, her eyes darting across the chapel. She was waiting for anyone to step forward on her behalf. No one did. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I just stood steady, the way I had for 15 years while she disappeared from his life. I had raised my son alone after she left him with nothing but medical bills and heartbreak. I had sat through every treatment, every operation, every late-night call when the pain came faster than the medicine could keep up. She had been gone, vanished, and now that there was money, she wanted back in. When I finally turned away from the coffin and walked toward the exit, I didn't look back at her. Ruth walked beside me, both of us moving slow and measured. Behind us, I heard chairs scrape against the wooden floor, hushed voices swelling into uneasy conversation. Veronica's sharp voice followed me out like the echo of something broken, but I didn't slow down. Outside, the wind whipped across the stone steps, and Ruth caught up with me at the curb. She handed me a manila envelope without a word. I tucked it under my arm. The funeral director, flustered and apologetic, rushed over to say he was sorry for the disruption. I told him not to worry. Death doesn't always bring dignity. There was nothing more to say. Ruth drove. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, my hands folded tight. Not calm-controlled. There's a difference. It took 11 minutes to reach her downtown office. Her assistant had already cleared the conference room and locked the door behind us. Ruth spread two documents across the table. The first was my son's updated will, dated 9 months before his passing. I had been there when he signed it, his hand thin but steady. In it, he left everything to me: money, property, stocks, insurance, even the intellectual rights to the app he had designed near the end. Not a single mention of Veronica. The second document was their divorce settlement, a complete waiver of future claims, notarized and filed with the county. No loopholes, no ambiguity. Ruth's voice stayed even, but her words carried weight. Legally, she has no ground to stand on. But she's bold. Expect her to push. I nodded, my jaw clenched, not from fear, but resolve. If Veronica wanted a battle, I would meet her head-on. I had mourned my son with every part of me. Now I would guard what he left behind. I would not let the woman who abandoned him rewrite his final chapter into a sideshow. Ruth slid me a copy of the estate inventory, neat and precise, bank accounts, company shares, the lake house, the condo, even the car. And then, at the very end, one more item, a private video letter, recorded by my son and stored under attorney-client protection. I hadn't known about it. Ruth tapped the folder gently. It's time. We drove straight to the courthouse, not for a hearing yet, but for a meeting Ruth had arranged with the probate judge. Given the size of the estate and the tension already brewing, he had agreed to review the documents early. Inside his chambers, Ruth laid everything out: my son's will, the divorce decree, the signed waivers. The judge flipped through each page, his brow furrowed, but his pace steady. Within an hour, he confirmed what we already knew. Veronica's claims would be flagged as invalid the moment she tried to file them. He issued a temporary protective order over the estate. We walked out into the thickening clouds, the air heavy, like the sky itself was bracing for the storm. As we stepped down the courthouse stairs, Ruth's phone rang. She put it on speaker. It was Veronica's lawyer, his voice cracking, asking for a meeting to discuss a joint resolution. Ruth's reply was clipped. All communication must be in writing, and any reference to her outburst at the church will be included in our response. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I had been silent for years for the sake of peace. That ended the moment she uttered 24 million over my son's coffin. That evening, back at home, I finally opened the private video letter. The screen flickered, and there he was, sitting in his chair by the window, the one where I used to read to him as a boy. His face was thinner, his voice quieter, but steady. He spoke about the foundation he wanted me to build: scholarships for students, a memorial garden behind the tech lab, community programs that would carry his name forward. And then he spoke about me, about how I had stood by him, about the strength he prayed I would keep showing even after he was gone. Near the end, He said words that sank into me like stone. If she comes back, I need you to stand your ground. Not just for me, but for yourself. She walked away. Mom, you never did. You deserve everything I left you. I chose you. I replayed that part twice. Then I sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing heavy but firm against my chest. I didn't cry, not that night. There would be time for tears later. For now, I had a decision to make. I pulled out a notepad and wrote down 3 names. 3 people who had stood by my son when she hadn't. One had access to hospital records. Another kept archived development contracts. The third held emails never shared publicly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protection. I would not let her twist his story. Not while I had breath in my lungs. By the next morning, word had already spread, not about the inheritance that would come later. It was about the spectacle at the church. Neighbors whispered. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years started calling. They asked how I was holding up, but beneath their concern I could hear something else. Curiosity, doubt, that faint edge in their voices, like they weren't sure whose side to believe. I didn't return the calls. I sat at my kitchen table with a black coffee, staring out the window at the backyard where my son once played, the same yard where I planted forget-me-nots during his first chemo treatments. The quiet held me for a while, but it didn't last. By 10 that morning, Veronica posted a picture. A cropped photo of my son, one she had no right to share. The caption read, "Heartbroken to say goodbye to the love of my life. May justice be served." Comments poured in fast, sympathy emojis. Strangers calling her brave. People urging her to fight for what was hers. Some even mentioned lawyers. And just like that, it shifted. I had expected a courtroom battle. I hadn't counted on this war of image, of perception. And if I had learned anything, it was that people believe what they see first. Even if it's a lie, I texted Ruth. Her response was immediate. Already monitoring. Timeline in progress. Within the hour, my son's CFO Priya called me. 2 journalists had already asked about the widow. She nearly spat the word. I told her to stay put. We wouldn't react. We would respond. There's a difference. At noon, I drove downtown to meet Ruth in a private library that had once been a bank. Thick walls, no stray ears. What we were preparing wasn't just legal anymore. It was reputational. Ruth outlined the plan in 3 steps. First, confirm our legal position with the judge's temporary order, and move toward a permanent block on Veronica's interference. That was already in motion. Second, collect every piece of personal evidence my son had left behind. Emails, contracts, witness statements. Priya had correspondence. Miguel had notarized property settlements. Daniel, the ICU nurse, had written testimony about the final weekend the visits Veronica never made. Third, Ruth said we would hold an event. Not just a press release. Something public, undeniable. A dedication ceremony for the foundation my son had envisioned. She believed the best defense wasn't just court, it was community. And she was right. We set the date. 3 days from now. The venue, City Hall's main conference room. The mayor had already voiced support for the foundation months earlier. Back when my son was alive, the groundwork was laid. Now it was time to carry it forward. That evening, I drove to my son's old tech office. The place was dim now, the furniture covered, the life of it long gone since the acquisition. Priya met me at the door with the keys. She led me to his desk, His chair was still there. So was the chip mug he used every morning. The whiteboard still carried half-erased notes in his handwriting. It was like he had just stepped out for a moment, even though I knew better. Priya pressed a flash drive into my hand. She didn't say much, just nodded. Inside were his final emails. Filtered, organized, the important ones flagged. That night, at my own desk, the same desk where I once graded papers when I taught second grade, I opened the files. 3 emails stood out, one to Ruth, one to Priya, and one to me, except mine was never sent. It was a draft. It read, "Mom, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if she shows up, I know it'll be hard. But you need to remember you are the only one who stayed. You were there when I couldn't walk, when I couldn't sleep, when the machines outnumbered my skin. Don't let her rewrite what we both lived. I chose you, not her, never her." My doubts vanished. I had carried anger all week, but now I had clarity. She wanted to weaponize public opinion. I would stand with the truth. 3 days later, I walked through the back entrance of City Hall. Ruth had arranged it that way, less spectacle, less noise. But the auditorium was already filling with people, press, investors, community leaders, even the mayor. The event was billed as a dedication, the public launch of the Holbrook Memorial Foundation. But we all knew it was more than that. It was a line drawn in plain sight. Rows of chairs faced a projection screen, a banner hung at the front, a legacy of purpose. My son's face was on the program. That quiet smile he wore when he was proud, but never wanted to admit it, now it would speak for him. At 10:02, the doors closed. At 10:05, Ruth stepped to the podium. No charm, no flourish, just a clear voice. "Good morning. We are here to honor the vision and values of a man who lived with quiet brilliance and left behind a plan for impact. What you'll see today is not about loss. It is about intention, about clarity, about truth." Then the lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. A video, recorded 5 weeks before he passed. My son sat in his home office, shoulders slouched but eyes focused. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. But I want to explain, in my own words, why I made the choices I did. I don't want confusion. I don't want arguments. I want the truth to stand on its own." He spoke of his illness, his hope for the foundation, his decision to leave everything to me. His reasons. Calm, measured. Then came the words that silenced the room. "She left. When I needed her, she was gone. And when I built something worth coming back for, she returned. That will not define my legacy. I am choosing the one who never left." The room stayed silent even after the video ended. Not a cough, not a shuffle, just the heavy weight of truth pressing against every wall. I could feel the eyes on me. People waiting to see if I would break. I rose slowly, one hand steadying myself against the table before I walked to the podium. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't weak. I was carrying the voice of my son forward. I looked out at the crowd, their faces dim in the low light. Then I said, quiet but firm, "You all heard him, not me. Not Ruth, not lawyers, him." I let the pause sit. Let it burn into the silence. Then I continued. For 15 years, I stood beside my son through every trial. Not once did she return. Not once did she call. Now, after he's gone, she appears to claim what she abandoned. This foundation is not about money. It is about honoring the truth he chose. I nodded to Ruth. She walked to the projector and brought up the certified divorce papers. enlarged for all to see. The seal glistened under the lights. Murmurs rippled through the room. Then she displayed the waiver Veronica signed. A full surrender of any claim. The signatures clear. The date undeniable. Finally, the judge's protective order appeared on screen. 3 documents. 3 unshakable walls. When I finished, I stepped back, not with anger but with finality. That was when it happened. The side door opened. She walked in, late, dramatic, like she'd planned it that way. The black dress was gone. This time she wore a tailored gray suit, her hair pulled back, a pair of sunglasses hanging from the collar. But as the screen shifted to my son's last recorded words, her face cracked. People turned. Phones came out. A few gasps, a few whispers, but no one stood for her. Not one. She froze in the aisle, eyes darting like she was trapped. Her lawyer leaned close, whispered something, but she jerked away. For a long moment, she just stood there, lips parted but no words coming. Then, without ceremony, she turned and walked out. The doors clanged shut behind her. No applause, no jeers, just silence, heavy as stone. I exhaled, not relief but resolve. The battle wasn't over, but the stage had shifted. From that moment on, she would be chasing shadows. I would be carrying the light. The following morning, the headlines were everywhere. Not about her claims, not about the inheritance, but about the video. Tech visionary leaves fortune to mother, not estranged ex-wife. Final words seal legacy. Holbrook Foundation announced at City Hall. Community rallies around mother who never left his side. The photos were unavoidable. Me standing at the podium, her in the aisle, caught mid-turn, jaw tight, eyes wide. No statement she gave afterward could erase those images. She tried. She posted online, claimed editing, claimed manipulation. But the documents were public now. The judge had authorized disclosure of the decree and waiver, and Ruth released certified copies to the press. Within hours, her story collapsed under its own weight. By evening, no one was asking me questions about her anymore. They were asking about the foundation, about scholarships, about the memorial garden. Exactly what my son wanted. When the day finally quieted, I drove home alone. The house was dark still. I slipped off my shoes and left them by the door, just like I always did when he was a boy sleeping upstairs. Habit never dies, even when the reason is gone. I walked to his old room. The boxes I hadn't touched in months were still stacked by the window. Inside were his books, his hoodies, the sketch pads he filled during the long nights in treatment. I sat on the floor, lifted one hoodie to my chest, and breathed in a scent that was fading but not gone. For the first time in days, I cried. Not for the money, not for the fight, for him. For the little boy who once ran through this hallway in socks too big for his feet. For the young man who built something out of nothing. For the son who chose me even when he didn't have to. When the tears finally eased, I folded the hoodie carefully and placed it back in the box. I whispered into the quiet, "It's safe now, I promise." Then I turned off the light, leaving the room in shadows, and closed the door behind me. Weeks later, the foundation officially opened its doors. The first scholarships were announced, and applications poured in from students across the state. Local businesses pledged support, universities offered partnerships, and the mayor himself attended the ribbon cutting. I stood there with oversized scissors in my hand, smiling for the cameras though my heart was heavy. Not with grief alone, but with gratitude. the gratitude of seeing his vision planted in real soil. Reporters crowded me with questions. Some wanted sound bites about the money, others wanted to know about her, but I kept my answers steady. This foundation is about my son's legacy, not about disputes. He wanted his work to live on through opportunity, through growth, through community. That is what we are here to honor. They wrote it down. They quoted it. And for once, the story wasn't about scandal. It was about him. The weeks rolled into months, and the noise surrounding her faded like a storm that had spent itself. She filed one more claim in court, but the judge dismissed it in under 10 minutes. After that, silence. She was gone again, this time not by choice, but by defeat. And I didn't think of her anymore. My focus was elsewhere, on the students, on the programs, on keeping my son's name tied to hope instead of headlines. One evening, after a long board meeting, I returned home to find the garden he had planned finally finished. A stone walkway, benches, and rows of forget-me-nots surrounding a plaque with his name. I sat there alone until the sun dipped low, the sky painted with streaks of orange and violet. And for the first time since he left, I felt something like peace. Not because the fight was won, not because the money was safe, but because his voice, his choices, his legacy were all exactly where they were meant to be. As the last light faded, I whispered to the wind, "You chose me. Now I choose to keep you alive in this work." Then I rose, brushed the soil from my hands, and walked back inside. And the house, though still quiet, no longer felt empty.